You all set?
Yes.
Everybody all set?
Talk about the video being on.
I'd like to call to order the school committee for the evening of December 4th. You have before you an agenda. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Do we have any comments from the public? Seeing none, we'll move on. Presentations and discussions of issues of interest to the committee. Student success at NHS.
Yep. I will introduce the program and the speaker, and then turn it over to Andrew. Before, though, because I have the opportunity, I just wanted to note something exciting that happened at the high school last Friday. We had our principals list breakfast, and had, at its largest, was 42, but last Friday we recognized 64 students who made the principal's list. And I know this group likes data, so I split that down a little bit for you. We had 5 students who received special education services. We had 3 students who are former English learners. We had 20 students male, 44 students female. We had 1 Danish student, 4 Spanish students, and 1 Nepalese, with 58 English-speaking students for a total of 64. I think that that's remarkable achievement for the first quarter for our students, so we want the committee to be aware of that. Thank you. Tonight, you get to hear about another wonderful program, one that some of you have had the opportunity to hear about before, but since that time, it has expanded a bit and changed. It has some additional supports that weren't there last time Mr. Baselli had an opportunity to present to you. It does amazing work, as you're aware. We do want to make sure that the mission and the integrity of that program is kept. I think that sometimes an inclination by caring educator is Susie doesn't do her homework, maybe she should go to the educational success program. And so Andrew does a very nice job of being a gatekeeper and keeping a clear identity for the students for whom that program will best serve them in their educational needs. So it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Andrew Baselli.
Thank you for having me again. Appreciate it. So I run the Educational Success Program. We work out of the former superintendent's office. Thank you for that.
Thank you for moving.
Andrew, can I just stop you for, can you just take the microphone? Sorry. Thank you.
Does that work?
It's gonna be like Chinese
Do you
whispers.
want me to pass it?
That work?
Perfect.
So currently I work with 42 students, grades 9 through 12. And we have, 7 seniors on the books right now, and another 4 that are not registered as seniors that hopefully will graduate by the end of the school year. We're doing credit recovery with them. So if all goes well, we will graduate 11 seniors this year from the program, which is absolutely phenomenal. Of those 42 students, 11 of them I teach in an essentials level biology course. Along with my other duties, I run the Apex online system that we use for credit recovery. We use for some students who have social emotional issues who can't be in traditional classrooms, so they work out of my space and alternative space. 2 of those students work off campus for other reasons, and those students are finding great success with that program. So that's another thing that I monitor. Last year, we had the ability to work with the Martha's Vineyard Alternative High School, Project Vine it's called. They came over on island. We went around town, showed them Nantucket. We had lunch with them, with my students and their students, and this year, in the spring, we are scheduled to go over there and do a visit. Hopefully, we'll get the okay for that. So along with my other duties, I do behavioral consultations with teachers, with classrooms, behavior plans, so kind of run the gamut of everything, kind of continuation of what I did as a behavior specialist, moved it into this role. Like John mentioned, this past quarter, starting quarter 2, we got a TA to work with us, which is phenomenal, kind of alleviates some of the strain on me so I can get into other classrooms and do observations and help out some of our newer teachers and work with some of my kids when they're in class. So that's been really a godsend. This past quarter 1, we finished with one of our highest marks ever of passing 88% of all of our classes So that was 31 students passing 88% of their classes. The goal for us has been 85%, so that's huge. So now the kids are all pushing, they want to get up to 95, 100%, and that was their own discussions that they had, that if we could get to that level. So right now, we're seeing great success with it. I do anticipate by the end of the school year, our number getting up to 50, mid-50s. So we're supporting more kids. I'm working with guidance to identify kids earlier in the school year as opposed to waiting quarter 2, quarter 3, so that we can get them the supports that they need. Not necessarily bringing them into the program fully, but offering the supports that they need. Some kids, as we know, just aren't ready yet, and sometimes they need a little bit of guidance. So all in all, a great school year, a great start to it. We had I think everything's working out well. So.
Questions, Zona?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Vasselli.
Thank you.
Appreciate what you do.
I appreciate this brief update on your programming in 42. Is that the highest number you've had, or is that, no, what's the highest number you've had?
I think maybe 56
Wow.
at one point.
And those students come and go, or they're pretty much?
Yeah, I mean, to keep a student in full time in a program is really kind of detrimental to their own growth, educational and personal. So really, what I want to do is get them in, give them some substance, give them a foundation to work on, and then get them back into the regular ed classes. Do I still keep tabs on them? Absolutely. But we want to get them in, work with them as much as we can, and then get them back out. Because if they stay in too long, then they become reliant on the services and supports that are being offered. Our job is to get those kids to move on, graduate, and then become productive citizens, whether it's college, military, or wherever they choose.
Do you find you tend to be an advocate for them when they've returned to traditional classes? Do they still come back to you for support and?
Absolutely. I think
advocacy?
because of the structure that we have in place, they're recognizing if something's not going well and they need to take a break, or if they need to search out somebody, they'll come and talk to me to swing by the classroom, not necessarily for any academic support, but maybe just they need someone to talk to in the moment. And I love the fact that they recognize that I'm still there for them.
Cool. Because we're going through budgets, and you just happen to be the first presenter, you're not gonna be the only person I ask this question to, but I feel like it's our responsibility to, and I appreciate the presentation, but I also feel sometimes that we don't always get all the information that we need in order to fully know about a program. So and this is not to put you on the spot, but is there anything that we should know coming down the pike, or anything that you have a wish, or anything that you would like to see the program, or some of the stumbling blocks that you've had, that we can help as we're looking through everything, or certainly your principal can?
Yeah, I honestly, I would like to see our program viewed as an individual program, as math is, as science is, so that we have a budget that we could use if we needed to. I think what we do in our program I need to get out of a more traditional classroom sense, because the future of, I think, what I'm seeing from my students isn't in that. I think it's in getting out, and I've worked and started working with some on-island entities in terms of developing some boat building, which is going to do some team building things. So, a small budget to help with that, a space to do that, something along those lines where we can get these kids working through some real challenging projects in a team environment that they're going to be able to see long-term gains and be able to tie that into their everyday life and say, okay, I can get over this hurdle, I just need to really think about it, or I need to go to another team member and say, how should we address this? So would I like to have a little budget to play with? I would. I'd like a little travel budget. I'd like a little budget to be able to go out and buy some boats, or to rent a space to do something along those lines, or to take my kids off island so that when they're ready to leave, they can go and take those next steps. But I think that's something that we would sit down and have a conversation about and see what would best fit in the scope of what we're doing now, because we're still in our infancy of the program, and where we need to head with it, especially with the younger program starting at CPS and see what we need for those next steps for success.
Could I just tag on to that
Sure.
question? Your budget now comes from NHS regular ed? Oh, it's a special ed budget item, okay.
I don't have a
NHS
budget.
special ed.
Okay,
My budget is the special ed line item.
okay.
So if you need something, you go to special ed you have a line item in special ed?
If I need
John,
something,
go to
I,
John.
Goes to you, okay. Go ahead, sorry.
shall I answer? If I need something, I go and I make cold calls to people who can provide what I need, business people in the community or community members. I have not had great success in terms of getting special ed or monies.
And I just wanted to say full disclosure that Eagan Maritime has been working, talking about the boat building. My question wasn't necessarily prompted to that specifically.
Yep.
But I am just interested in the general budget piece. I just don't want that sort of full disclosure that we've had a conversation, but that I didn't, it wasn't prompted because of that discussion. Okay, that's good for me, thank you.
Thank you so much for being here tonight and for all you do for our students. 42 seems like a pretty significant number. And it's great that you're able to help them. How long do they typically stay in your program?
It's a great question. So right now, I have some, let's say I would ultimately like it to be a full 2 semesters, whatever that looks
Okay,
like.
I was thinking more long term.
Yeah,
but-
well, and there's some kids who require that. So some kids who are coming in with more social and emotional needs, they'll need to remain in the fold somehow. The students that are coming in for academic needs, they're in for a semester 2 max, and then it's back out. So we probably have, I would say, maybe 10 to 15 of those students, and the other kids we're still working on the other piece.
So it probably depends on the classroom dynamic and the classes they're taking as to how much they need to see you and at what grade level they need to see you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I do work with kids from all the way from, essentials level to AP level students. And sometimes it's to
Wow.
manage the stress, and sometimes it's to manage the time. And that's a big piece when they start moving up into that junior, senior year of time management and the stress of what that next step is for them moving on to college, is really trying to give them that foundation, I guess.
So when you get a student in the junior or senior year, is it, how are they identified usually? I mean, that far along in their schooling?
I think we have a great way of identifying students. We have our SST at the high school, and students' names are brought up. Guidance does a wonderful job, as does our school social worker. John and Jen do an awesome job of communicating with the teachers and making sure. And sometimes it's, hey, I'll go and take a look into a classroom, or I'll meet up with a student and say, where are you having trouble? Some of the negatives are some kids don't want to work in the program because it's a program. So they kind of see that as, other kids are going to see me in there. So, we'll work around that. We'll work in an alternative space. We'll make sure that there's check-ins that are done discreetly during the day.
So I can imagine you work very closely with the guidance department. in
Yeah,
that respect.
guidance,
Absolutely.
admin, school social worker, everyone. Teachers are
Yeah.
constantly coming into the room, checking in, how should we work with this? I have this student who's doing this. And like John said, it's a matter of we can't just bring anyone in, because then, as John said, every student that's not doing their homework is going to end up in a program. And programs are notorious dumping grounds for that. And I think when we first started this, it was very clear to everyone that we had to make sure that what we were doing was academic based with the other supports for the social emotional piece, but making sure that it wasn't just going to be for these students that weren't making effective progress or effective progress in their teachers' eyes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank
And
you.
again, I think I've said this before, I wish we could clone you.
Thank
Have one of you in every class.
Stu?
A, and there's only a B. A, sounds like you actually work with more than 42 kids. If you're checking in with kids who've been in the program previously, or kids who might eventually belong in the program. So it's more than 42, and I'm impressed. B, can I say you're a treasure? You've been here doing this sort of thing a long time, and I really appreciate it. I think we all do. Don't go away.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that.
Henry? What's the breakup, male, female?
The female population is very low. I work with 2 in my program on a daily basis. Students that are in that number of 42 that I work with is maybe 5 to 10. But we are very male heavy, and those personalities are strong. And sometimes the classroom, for those who've walked by, it is chaos, but it's a controlled chaos. And so we're very cognizant of making sure that every student feels safe, and every student feels like school is a place that they can come in and be themselves and achieve to their highest. So we have other places that they're working, not necessarily out of the classroom.
Why do you think that imbalance is there?
I think, that 5%, that 15% gets a lot of attention in every building. And I think we focus our attention on the loudest, and sometimes those kids who need the most aren't the loudest and asking for the most help. So it's our job, and again, we do a decent job of doing this, of identifying them and working with them. Nicole Gross runs an sub-program of what I do, and she has a lot of females in there, and sometimes it's a relationship issue, and we're understanding of that. And those that I have good relationships with, we bring in and are able to develop that and continue with that, the females. But sometimes it just doesn't work, and I'm the first to say if it's not working with me, then I reach out to Jen or to Julie and say we need support for this, and this isn't working right now. Doesn't mean it's not going to, but
Great. That really sounds like it's effective, and
I think it has been. I think it absolutely has been. But again, I think what we have in place really works. I think we have teachers that understand the structure of the support system, be it my program or guidance or SST, and that everyone reaches out because we all want the singular success of the whole child.
good. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah,
Thank you
very
guys.
much.
Appreciate it.
You dress up just for us.
Yeah, and I wore shoes.
Oh.
Socks?
Wow.
Would Martin know? Martin, are you going to be involved in this?
I'll be, if you don't mind sitting here, and there is a presentation that's going to be going behind you. It includes the information that you already have in the packet, that each individual department has to do their own budget. But I can come up if you want me to.
No.
How do you
Okay.
get on the mic, though?
So if I can, no, I don't think Andrew will, I mean, I don't think Martin will need to speak from there. I think he's going to be showing things on the board that you have in your packets. The first 4 pages of each presentation will be put up on the screen so that our viewing audience can see it, but the detail, the numbers on pages 5 and beyond would not project well and won't be up there, okay? So I don't think you'll have to be looking back and forth, but if we could have, with your permission, Chris Maury to come up, and then I'm gonna do a little preamble to this, to talk about how this process works.
Chris?
Hey, Chris. So a lot of work to date has taken place. Each of the departments and each of the schools start working on their budget in October. You could even argue end of September, the process starts. They work with their school councils. They are receiving input from staff. We talk as an administrative team about what the needs are, and then each department will present. So tonight, we have athletics, technology, facilities, and community school. And then at the next school committee meeting, we will have the 4 schools, NES, NIS, CPS, and NHS, present. In addition, ELL and special education, and we'll cover central office in that as well. The one change this year is that as they present, I've allowed them to present almost most of what they need. But I need to have the school committee understand that when we get to the end of these presentations, meaning at the 2nd December, we clearly will not be getting enough of an appropriation to cover everything that is expressed to you. And so, but I wanted this year for you to see what their needs were, and then at the end of that, we will know what our appropriation is going to be and how much of that we can approve and what may need to be cut from that amount. It may be that, and in fact is, that our our requests between tonight and at the next meeting will total almost 1.7 million. And that will not be what we get in an appropriation. So you need to understand that going in, but at least you get to hear and see what the needs are. And then based on input after the second meeting, the school committee will talk about the budget and guide me in the priorities, understanding that we have finite dollars that will be available. And I have been, and Martin and I have been working with Libby to let them know what our requests will be. And they are working on the revenues to see what that figure will be that we receive. So with that caveat, we'll let each of them present tonight. You will have graphs that we've used every year to show what percentage that department is of the entire NPS budget and how much of that particular budget is spent on staffing versus other things. And you will see very consistently that a great percentage is spent on staffing. And then they will have a page with any personnel or budget increases, and they have given you a rationale, which I expect that you've probably already read as we go through those. And this is a good night to ask about their requests, and if you have further questions on what they have put forward, this would be the time to do that. So I'm
Thank
Can
you.
I,
Good, thank you.
May I just ask Mike a question? I'm not asking what they are, but have you asked your staff to prioritize? So do they have some kind of idea of
Yeah.
presenting the budget, what their priorities would be, should you come back with a cut?
I have. Sometimes the answer is, yes, I understand that process, and sometimes the answer is, I can't cut anything. And, so it's a process. We'll work through it. But when we're all together and we know what our appropriation is and what's before everybody, there's a pretty good give and take among the administration saying, I realize that this need here is greater than this need here, and we can usually come to consensus, and sometimes somebody has to play Solomon.
Thank you.
That was helpful.
So, the first presenter is Mr. Maury. Excuse me.
Just before I dive into budget, I'd like to speak to a couple things. Number one, I want to build off the success that John talked about earlier and add one number to that. Of that 64 students that were recognized at the principal's breakfast, 38 of them are student athletes from our fall sports, which we put an emphasis on the student athlete and students coming first. All those student athletes who reached principal's list, as with the honor roll students, are all recognized at our fall sports banquet. So I want to make sure we get that number on the table. Secondly, Andrew has left, but I just wanted to speak to Andrew because I do get to work with Andrew quite a bit and just throw him a little congratulations for what a great job he does, not only with the students here in the school, but he's also been our volleyball coach for the last 5 years and has done a terrific job in working with that program. And we're lucky to have people like Andrew around that are willing not only to work with these students during the school day, but also after school. And he has done a terrific job with that program and the kids that are involved in it. From a standpoint of budget, the athletic budget remains where it has been for the last 11 years that I've been here, with representing 3% of the overall school budget. The bulk of the funding for athletics goes into our payroll and then obviously into our transportation services. We're probably the easy tag to start off this mission because we're plain and simple, we are not requesting any additional funds. We're fortunate to have both our participation fee system, which has worked very, very well from a standpoint of providing extra funding for athletics so that we can not only fund the programs that we have now, but we have been able to add additional programs and been able to fund those programs through the use of those additional funds, along with the Booster Club group that we work with on a regular basis and from a standpoint of what they provide for athletics. So we have no requests on the table for additional funds, and I will just put out to you for any questions that you may have with the existing budget.
What percentage do the participation fees make up of your budget?
We have, in the last couple years, I think we had a high last year of $105,000 that we brought in for participation fees. We're expecting at about the same or maybe even a little bit higher this year because our participation numbers are going up. So that's roughly the figure that we've been dealing with for the last couple of years.
Thank you.
With no
Yes.
request, you kind of make it difficult for me to ask the question that I said I was going to ask everybody tonight, so I guess the questions.
I have questions. I don't know how you can't be asking for more money with the increase, of students participating in sports and the increased demands that you face with just concussion protocols and testing, the online sign up and our EL students and trying to navigate that, specifically at the middle school. The programming that I would love to see continue to thrive at that level. I don't know. I just think that some extra support in your office would be helpful. I see you, you're doing everything, Chris. You're out there all the time. You're putting, sandbags on the goals. You're doing everything. You're providing food for the visitors and meeting with the refs and counseling coaches and parents, and then you look at the coaches traveling and also having an assistant coach. I would think would be a huge safety priority, having at least 2 people traveling with our teams. I don't know. I would hope that you could look at this and hear us and maybe go back with.
We have started to look at some of that, and we're looking at different ways. As it sits right now, obviously travel is a big part of athletics. We do try to cover every single team that's traveling with 2 coaches or 2 adults traveling with each team. With most of our teams, we do have a second coach with each team, and that is done primarily through volunteer coaches. The truth of the matter is anybody coaching at this level is really not in it for the money, and I don't think that putting the extra dollars on the table is going to make that piece of the puzzle any better or any worse. I think from a standpoint of what I do, I think I'm fortunate I've got some good people around me. The first one I would have to mention would be my wife. She's a tremendous support system for me. From a standpoint of what I do, she's there to help in any way, shape, or form that she can. Over the past 11 years, my honey-do list has gotten pretty long from a standpoint of payback for her, but that's between.
So may I interrupt for a minute? If you
Sure.
were to retire and somebody was to come into that position, we
She's
wouldn't
going with me.
Exactly, we wouldn't have those added benefits. So I just would hope, forward thinking, that we can help support the athletic program and help support you continue to grow the program.
Well, I think we are looking at that, and also looking at from a standpoint of, we have a full-time athletic trainer on staff now, and Matt has been, I can't say enough things about Matt Hunt. He has been a tremendous help, not only from a standpoint of what he does from a standpoint of his athletic training duties, but he's also a second set of eyes and ears that I have constantly out on the fields or on the playing courts. We have a radio system where we can communicate and stuff. So when we have multiple events going on, Matt, as well as athletic trainer, he helps out with site supervision and stuff. And Matt is somebody that absolutely loves what he's doing. He has a great connection with the kids, and he has been a huge plus for our athletic program. We're also taking I want to take a look with Mike at the administrative assistance position and maybe restructuring that in a way where we can get some involvement from that end from a standpoint of some of the after-school stuff that takes place. So all the things that you're talking about, we're taking a look at, and that certainly could be something that changes in the future. I think from a standpoint of the participation fees, I think as we build our participation, we build the programs that we're providing, there's going to be a catch-up point where we're going to have to put more funding on the table to cover those programs. We've been fortunate to this point to be able to cover it with what we've got. And I think, it started back when I first took over as athletic director. We were looking at making a lot of budget cuts. And rather than taking programs away from the kids, we put that participation fee system on the table, and it has been great from a standpoint of being able to maintain everything that is very important for these kids, and not only to maintain it, but to build on it.
Well, thank you. Oh, sorry.
Okay, through the chair. I want everybody to know that we have taken things out of the budget and increased the budget in ways that haven't come to you as requests. When we've added volleyball and tennis and cross country and hockey, I think was my first year or second year, we have put those stipends into that. Those aren't coming out of the athletic revolver.
Those are not coming out.
Those are not
Correct.
coming.
Nothing from a
Supplies,
salary standpoint comes out
Right.
of the revolver.
Okay.
The revolver is used for, in some respects, for some of our transportation costs, but primarily is used for supplies, uniforms and equipment for teams.
We have also negotiated increases to that stipend list for the collective bargaining agreement, particularly worked with Chris, particularly at the middle school.
Middle school level.
Because they were really low for, they're not putting as much time perhaps in as a varsity coach would. Because when you're a varsity coach, you coach year round. It really isn't just one season. But they do as much travel in the season. And travel here is, it's a lot to expect of coaches. And I agree with Chris that they don't do it for the salary, but it doesn't mean that we can ignore that. And we haven't ignored that, so that you understand that.
And I want to make sure the coaches feel supported and that they have the resources. And Chris, I feel like sometimes, just from my observations, it seems that you're spread pretty thin. And, you know, if there's a way we could help support you, please let us know.
Okay, appreciate that.
Thank you.
Steve?
Yeah, unfortunately for you, you can help me understand how these charts work. On the, the very bottom line, it went down a little bit last year, it's back up, but still not where it was 2 years ago. So I don't have any problem with that. Is it primarily the salaries that are affecting that?
It's primarily the salaries, and basically what happens, we have 3 different levels for coaches. And depending on the longevity of the coach's experience, those can fluctuate up and down. We've lost a number of experienced coaches over the past couple years, where we go from a level 3 funding to a level 1 funding, and those can make some significant differences in the budget from that standpoint. So that's
I
primarily
remember writing those changes into the contract.
correct.
Yeah. So where it says salaries, the 2 different groups of salaries, that includes the stipends.
Correct.
Yes?
So the you have the administrative salaries, which are myself and Travis as administrators in the office, and then you have the coaches' salaries included. In that coaches' salary item is the athletic trainer. So that is the coaches' salaries plus the athletic trainer.
Okay.
And that's another addition with the, it wasn't always a full-time athletic trainer.
Correct. When the athletic trainer position was first put on the table, it was a .6 athletic trainer and a .4 PE teacher. And we have, with the last time, we went to a full-paid athletic trainer, which, as I said a minute ago, has been a huge plus for us because Matt does a lot more than just some of the athletic, or his athletic training duties.
Henry? No, I think the program is very well run and very successful. You upgrade helmets every year, or every other year?
So we are required by the state, we are, as far as football helmets go, football helmets have to be recertified every single season, as well as shoulder pads. We work with Rydell, is our football helmet provider. They have a representative that comes down every year. He examines all of our equipment, and anything, any of the helmets that are any of the helmets that are not in good standing are rejected. All the helmets go back to Rydell for recertification every single year. And they have a shelf life where even if they're not getting used on the regular basis, we have to get rid of them after 7 years. Exact same thing with lacrosse helmets. Lacrosse helmets are on a 2-year cycle. And don't ask me why, but there are no regulations with regards to ice hockey.
I was going to ask.
I think it's probably coming down the pike, but right now it is not.
It's interesting.
I'll do a mini shout out. The web scheduling page is great. And you guys keep it right up to the minute. I mean, if there are postponements, changes, etc. I've really been counting on that. I've got an icon on my desktop. It's great. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the compliment. And I'm going to pass that along to Travis, because
I
he
did
really
that
does a lot
today
of work
already.
on that website.
And I would echo what you've said about Matt. I think he has been a tremendous addition. And I see
got
him interacting with kids because he and I go back and forth on some of the kids that have had injuries.
I think you've got a huge plus anytime you have an employee that's willing to put in extra time and energy, and that's exactly where Matt is. You can see as you watch him with the kids, and he's got a passion for working with them. So not only very good from a standpoint of the medical end of athletic training, but also from a standpoint of building relations with the kids is a huge plus.
Anybody else? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
And next year, 50. Technology?
So this is Jen's first time through the budget process, and
For the school.
for the school. Yeah. We've done it in the town, but I'm sure we do it a little bit differently. So, welcome.
As Martin presents these standardized slides of what percentage of the total budget, technology is also 3%. And if you go to the next one, the payroll for the technology department is just under 50%. A substantial amount of the budget is for the software and hardware. Hardware is generally upgrades that need to happen every year. Software, along with professional services, are annual things. Many of them are maintenance agreements that we have to keep going, and/or contracts. So, the increases that we were looking at is moving. I'll leave the salary line items or that funding just to the side for a minute. The professional services was slightly underfunded when I walked in the door on July 2nd because of some increases in some contracts that had taken them over what the line item was. So that was quite a surprise for me to walk in, and that particular line item was pretty much maxed out right from the get-go. Hardware, there's an increase in there, but you have to consider the fact that the Chromebooks are being funded a little differently between the 2 years, which we'll see when we look at the analysis. And then software, again, there's some additional software contracts that we need. I'll jump back to the salary line items for a minute, and if you look at the next page, it kind of explains where those numbers are coming from. So, if you look, I did a comparison to give you an idea of how things have grown since 2010. In 2010, you had 3 10-month employees, technicians, and 1 database specialist. Fast forward to 2019, we have 3.5 technicians. 2 are 10-month, 1 is 12-month, and then we have the database specialist. And actually, I realize now that it's actually 2.5 10-month. I'm sorry, there's a half a person that's so many hours a week to cover that additional half. You look at the number of teachers have grown, and the students have grown, and it's somewhere between 25 and 35%. Specific hardware, and I can give you more information, but then I start speaking geek and people tend to glaze over. But in 2010, we had physical servers, which are, equipment in a rack. We certainly have progressed to now we have virtual servers, the benefit of which is you need a new one and you spin it up in a couple of hours. You don't have to spend a month budgeting for it and procuring it, all of that. The Chromebooks, we had no Chromebooks in 2010, of course, and now we have 980 deployed. There are far more than that in various states of repair and or being prepped so that we can get them out to the classrooms and to the teachers. The network in 2010 was pretty minimal. There you had the labs where you had a lot of computers. They weren't necessarily riding on top of that network. As of this summer, we, with the E-rate program, had finished deploying the rest of 190 access points. So these devices that you see on the ceiling with the blue lights, they are deployed around the school and providing wireless access. It's really substantial how much can be provided. One of the limitations of it, though, is when you're trying to do video and that kind of thing, and or video conferencing. those type of things, we still have to rely on the physical network and wire things in. So, but it's a substantial amount of growth. One of the reasons that I've requested the increase in technicians is we had one year-round person, and we had the one 10-month person, and that Jamie was assigned to CPS, and Jason, as a 10-month person, had some extra hours that he could work in the summer to repair all of those Chromebooks. Not just repair them, but look at each one, touch them, make sure they're functioning properly, and that they're ready to be given back to the students that following year. So bringing that up to 2 year-round will support the Chromebook program much better.
If I may interject, I think the other part of that is to remember how much we're doing in the summer with summer programming that we didn't do 10 years ago. And so not only are you getting ready for the next school year, which was always the case, but without Chromebooks, you're also troubleshooting in the summer when something goes down, the network goes down, or a computer goes down. So there certainly is that need to have more full-time staff that will, be available.
Along with upgrading the systems in general. There are quite a few systems right now that were well beyond useful life, that I've really been focusing, and administration and facilities, as a matter of fact, have been helping me quite a bit in getting some of that equipment. We were able to do some of it over the summer, but we really need to get a lot of that equipment that's obsolete phased out and or replaced and brought up to speed. The one thing I would like to point out with the hardware budget, and it might be easiest to look, I'm not sure we have a slide for it, but when you look at the comparison between the years on the sheet that you have in front of you, the budget seems to be remaining pretty stable. But if you look at the hardware budget for fiscal year 19, that included $133,000 allocated for the purchase of Chromebooks, and it was a one-time purchase. So what we've done is we've pulled that in to that hardware budget so that the Chromebooks are funded, and they're at the top of the list of what gets funded. What that does, though, is knock out about $80,000 of other hardware replacement costs that would have happened. So I just wanted to point out there's kind of a shift in the way, because Chromebooks, we're committed to the Chromebook program, we're committed to the students having these devices when they walk into their classes, and we're growing it into the younger children. We have to be able to provide those devices. And they're lasting, 4 to 5 years. But we still want to have the incoming 6th graders and 9th graders be starting with a new device that can take them through those particular school years. So.
And again, if I can jump in, you may remember, those of you who have been on the board for a while, that while maybe we have underfunded hardware in the budget, we have made up for that with year-end funds, buying, Chromebooks or whatever. That works as long as you have year-end funds. If you don't, then you're not, and you're underfunding in the budget, then we're gonna get caught short someday. And so Jen and I have talked, and she's trying to make that a little bit more honest than we have in the past. That helps.
And I also, I'm very big on obsolescence programs. I've got it going out 10 years showing if the virtual environments remain roughly the same, if the networking remains roughly the same, which of course it won't, but if we use that as a plan, these things last 3 years, these things last 5 years. Chromebooks you know, and looking at how those space out and need to be replaced. So you can, you know, and there are little ups and downs in there where I will certainly need some year-end funds for certain things.
Okay, Zona?
Good, thank you.
I'm just impressed because I look at, I mean, the fact that the technology, considering the world that we live in today, reliant on technology, that you still remain only 3% of the budget with over 1,600 students. I don't know how you do it. And also your salary range that you're only 49%. That to me is impressive, but also worrying a little bit. I just want to make sure that you've got what you need. I do remember the days of the budgets and how it looked for technology, and to give you a heads up, sometimes technology was the first one to take a hit in days of budget cuts.
Mhm.
And I think we've been able to rectify some of that, but you're certainly, you know, the department was always considered sort of an easy pull, and I think we've changed that because we want to cut short on technology. But so if I'm looking at this correctly, with a new school, with all the technology needs that we have, the increase from 2010 to 19 is 0.5 of a tech, 1 10-month position, and 1 12-month position. That's the growth over that time period. Is that right?
That's right.
Again, that is astounding to me, and I would want to make sure that your department has what you need to do everything, because as soon as someone's computer doesn't turn on, I know your department is the first department to get called. I also know how busy it is, not only with the school needs, but the community school needs and the community needs. I've been in this building in the summer when the internet is down and people, you know, are trying to get their PowerPoint up for their whatever. And I'm glad you've got more staff coming in 12 months out of the year, but again, I wonder if you've got fully the support that you need to keep the building going year-round. So, just my comments from what I've experienced in the past, but a great budget, and I'm just amazed that you can do all of that with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I have a quick question, random question, but what happens to all of the Chromebooks, you know, as we're switching them out in 9th grade? What happens to those Chromebooks?
When an 8th grader goes into 9th grade, those Chromebooks, along with the ones that are not used from 11th to 12th, those, we move them down into carts that are going into NIS and now NES also. So that a cart in NIS will actually pretty much be assigned to a classroom.
Okay.
Occasionally there'll be some testing or that kind of thing, so we have spares that are sitting around. In NES, it would be more of a cart being available to teachers who use it for a particular task that they're working with the children on. So we've been able to grow the number of carts at NES by 3 this year with just the Chromebooks that we're sending down. Now, one thing that's happened is we sent Chromebooks down last year that went into the 4th grade. And those, because they're now reaching beyond their useful life, they're failing more and more. So we have to kind of shift around where are we putting the most reliable ones, and they need to go in classrooms where they're used every day. Once they are legitimately beyond useful life, we use a recycling program. There's not too many left. We use them for parts, we use them, you know, we take them apart, we use as much as we can, and then they are recycled out.
Great, thank you. I mean, and I would think that there's a balance between keeping them for, you know, keeping them going as long as you can versus the amount of time it takes your staff to consistently repair the older Chromebooks. I would think that there's probably a fine balance there.
Yes, it's been something that I'm a little different the way I do things from Karen, and Mike and I have talked a lot about it as business-wise. If you have a 90%, 10% rule, how much time are you going to spend on something to get it back to functional? If it's going to take all of your time to get one thing going, How much can you get done in the same amount of time if you're working on something that's more easily repaired? Or how many can you get repaired? So mark it as it needs a lot, put it over there, and plow through the rest. Let's roll them out as fast as we can.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Steve?
I guess one of the things we wondered when Chromebooks were instituted at CPS was what their life was gonna be. It sounds like about 4 years is getting to be the,
4 years we can pretty much count on.
yeah.
Beyond that, they get a little flaky. And in many cases, sometimes it's the batteries, sometimes it's just keyboards failing and screens that wear out. They get shadows around the outside, so you want the kids to have something that's.
Oh, yeah, no, as I said, we were curious, we knew we would have to be watching. And now with 900 of them, you know, you're gonna be rotating more of them out, I think. I'm gobsmacked, to use the English term, that you're not asking for more technicians. If we're up over 900 Chromebooks now that require maintenance, are these people working 40 hours a day? How are they getting it done?
So you.
Go ahead.
A couple of ways we approach it. When the students come in September, their Chromebook is working, and we have plowed through all 900 of them
Yep.
to make sure they're working well. So if we have issues where they need repairs, they come and check in. If it's something where the repair is going to take a while, it needs to go back to the manufacturer or something like that, they're swapped out with kind of a more permanent loaner. So they have a Chromebook that they're moving around with them. If it's something that it's, you know, fairly easily fixed, they use the loaner carts that are in the library. So those resources help too. So they tend to, you know, be cycling through all the time. They're coming in all the time, they're being repaired all the time and going out. It really is just the summer when we have all 900, or all, actually it's closer to 1,400, but we have them all in one place and we're looking at all of them and repairing all of them if necessary.
And the we being, how many technicians in the summer?
This summer, it was pretty much two people working full-time.
But we did bring somebody else on board
Yes.
in the summer. So
but he was
not
gone.
all of your technicians work through the summer or want to work
Right.
through the summer. And so we've been fortunate in the last 2 summers to have somebody who has come in on a part-time basis. But what happens at some point is you spend more on overtime than you would on a 12-month person. So that's where we are. Clearly, I mean, we've talked about this, the goal is to move from 3.5 to 4, 1 for each school, and that will happen in the near future. And I think the other goal, making more go from 10 months to 12 months.
But the near future isn't this budget cycle?
Not to go to 4 in this budget cycle.
You really think they, okay.
Keep in mind that NES and NIS, these Chromebooks are in
Right.
carts.
Yeah.
So,
They're not getting the same heavy use.
yeah, it's a different kind of use, and the teachers are, you know, much more hands-on with how they are used. So as far as being repaired, they're being repaired more for obsolescence than they would be for just wear and tear.
I guess then please pass along commendations to your technicians for keeping up
They're wonderful.
with all this stuff, because I am amazed, given the numbers that
they're
you've got
wonderful.
now to work with. I have a question, maybe it's better for you, Mike, since you've been here. How much on average leftover funds, year-end funds, have been being spent annually?
So I'll remind you that we're on TV and and I'm a little reluctant to talk too much about what is remaining, but we've been fortunate. Year-end funds, what really determines whether we have year-end funds is the tuition, special ed tuition line. When we go over what we had budgeted for special ed tuition, then there are very few year-end funds. But in the last few years, when we've been able to bring kids back from residential and in-house, you can realize a savings and and Martin can correct me, but pretty much we have put about $100,000 towards technology at the end of the past few years. So that works, and we've been able to try to keep up with things, but there's no guarantee that that will always work.
Well, and it
Right.
sounded as if Jen was working towards
Right.
trying to work that into the
She is.
regular
To
anticipated
institutionalize the
budget.
budget, that's correct.
It doesn't hurt to have a warm winter either.
That's right.
Henry,
Savings and,
thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you very much.
You know she's gonna give out some.
Oh.
No, good.
We try to find it where we can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, God, watch it. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Hi. So, facilities takes up 13% of the public schools budget, and 48% of that is payroll. As Mr. Kozo said, most of our budgets are mostly payroll. 25% of it is utilities, 18% services, 7% for supplies, and 2% for phones. Currently, we have 29 employees in the facilities department, and we still have openings. We have a Saturday security opening, we have an electrician position opening, and we have a part-time person, day person at the high school opening. So, fully staffed, we're about 31.5. I have 7 request changes. They're not all increases. So, I guess I'll go in order of that. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So we're requesting a decrease for funding for electricity, and the sheet that I just handed out shows you that last year, NES electric bill equaled $67,949, and we had $100,000 allocated for that. In that line item, we're asking to decrease that $20,000 because we're basically in the same position we were last year. We've been tracking month per month, and it's pretty level. So I'm really comfortable decreasing that line item to $80,000 this year. I think it will amply cover that expense. Adding a custodian to NIS, this is the request that I asked for. They currently have 3 night custodians to clean that building, which is a 72,214 square foot building. It's a big chunk. And 2 of those custodians do crossings in the afternoon, meaning they go out and they're crossing guards, so some of their time is taken up doing that. So that's a $47,840 request. That's union-driven starting salary for a custodian. The next is increased funding for repair and maintenance at NIS. NIS, most of our equipment is now out of warranty, and we're finding things like the elevator we've had issues with the chiller, we've had issues with some other equipment, and it comes out of our contractor's budget or our repair and maintenance budget, and $20,000 is not ample. It's just not to maintain a building that size when things are just going to come up. The next item is a decreased funding for NHS electricity. Same scenario, we came in at, there's a typo in the sheet that I handed out. It says 204, it was actually 209 last year, and the budget was for 275. I'm pretty comfortable, and Martin is as well, that we can, meet the line item of 250. I think that we'll be fine. Then I've asked for an increase for central systems maintenance. So central system maintenance is a line item used for printers, copiers, campus-wide. Printers and copiers, we purchased from state contract, we purchased the warranties from state contract. All of those changed last year. They used to be 3-year maintenance agreements. Now they give us a 3-month warranty, and it doesn't include copies. So the cost per copy has gone up. The increased cost for repairs has gone up. Some cases, we've seen a 30% increase. So we're requesting $11,500 to be added to that line item for the copiers. It's really straightforward. It's based on what our contracts are right now for those items. And the last item, oh, I guess I missed one. For a central system maintenance contractor. So the contractor line item is what we use for repair and maintenance for a contractor that does repair and maintenance on all buildings, like plumbing, electrical, HVAC. And we're finding with prevailing wage rates have gone up, and that's state-driven wages, predominantly driven by unions. Just hourly rates from electricians and plumbers, or HVAC people, things have just increased over time. So we're asking for an increase in that line item. The total with the increases and decreases, the request is for $91,790. That's a total increase that I'm asking for facilities. Not saying I'll get it all, but.
Donna?
Nothing.
I feel the same way in your department as I do with technology. I sit here and I think, really, I mean, for all of what you do and what you have to cover to be such a small percentage of the budget is surprising and commendable.
Thank you.
I first of all love the layout of the budget. It's very easy to read and very easy to see the changes, the decreases, increases. So
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you. How confident are you in finding the custodian at NIS with what you started with you've got three
We have
positions open?
3.5 right now. So we have a custodian, her name is Maybelle. She works 9 to 1 at NES, and then she goes over and works 1 to 5 at NIS. It's really, I'd like to put her at NES full-time. They are short as well. We've added classrooms in there, we've added, Head Start, we've just added a lot. Community school is thriving in that building. We're having a hard time keeping up in some cases, especially when somebody's out or on sick or on vacation or something. It's difficult. So I'd like to move Maybelle over and hire a full-time person at NIS to cover that. That part-time 1 to 5, 3 people to clean that building, and then the part-time 1 to 5 is just not ample. We're filling it up more. We're doing after-school programs in there more and more and more. We're using the gym more often. We're using the cafeteria more often. I think it's okay when it's a brand-new building and we're, just doing the basics, but we're not doing that anymore. It's just more work.
And how do you keep up? I mean, the more, we've talked in previous meetings about using the school more and using all 4 schools after school. You've got the community pool. You've got a lot of activity after 2 o'clock. So it's I know it's difficult to keep that cleaning schedule and being able to, so I don't know how you do it with the staff that you have, and I worry with you saying you've got those 3 positions open, that we're still, I hope that you can find that 4th custodian. Do you have an idea of why?
I didn't talk about the electrician, did I?
No.
We are asking for a $12,450 increase in the electrician's salary because we have been completely unsuccessful at the salary we had set for that. I've advertised that, I don't know how many times, Logan? 4 times. it was at an $85,000 salary. Martin's been putting in for the increases every year that go along with the union increases, and we put in for $12,450 to make it a $100,000 offer to get an in-staff electrician. So that is really important to me. We spend a significant amount in electricians every year. If we could fill that position, it's not just electrician, it's also audio video, which would help Jen out a lot, so it would sort of be shared. I know we have, in this past year, we've had a lot of problems in the auditorium. We've upgraded a ton of equipment, we've added new amps, we added a new amp at the football field with new speakers. That went down. A lot of technology, I know, the sound system was gone. So we had to replace it, things like that, we could really utilize this person in those, and we spend a lot of money on those things. I would also like to point out, and I should have touched on this when we were talking about energy, or when we were talking about electricity. This past fiscal year, we replaced the auditorium stage lights, and when you get the reports from National Grid on your savings, the annual savings for that is, they approximate about $5,000 annual savings in electricity costs.
Wow.
So that's NHS CPS budget. So this is another reason why I'm very, very comfortable with that decrease. The library, we had National Grid come in and change all the lights in the library. They're all LED. Those projected savings are $2,000 annually. And we just changed the stadium lights on the football field. Those projected annual savings is $8,000 a year for those stadium lights. We just did that upgrade. It's just another reason why I'm very comfortable with that decrease in that line item. So hopefully that all pans out.
I'm just looking on here, and it didn't jump out at me on the community school, but the community school still gives funding to your budget, do they, for custodian or for?
I don't think we've ever gotten it. I think it's set aside, but I don't think we've ever.
So,
We budget for it, anything if you want to go to it, but the past 2 years, as you are all aware, the community school was a little,
Right.
had a little trouble at the end here, so we haven't applied that. If need be, and you'll see in the next presentation, it is budgeted.
It is budget,
$50,000
okay,
for the
couldn't
upcoming
pull it
year.
out.
Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I have a question. With all of our technology use, do we evaluate the necessity of the printers and copiers at this point?
Constantly.
Paper.
Yeah, it just seems like with all this technology.
so it is a topic in tomorrow's leadership meeting. I'm trying to think of how much I want to say. The theory that going to Chromebooks would lessen printing has not panned out in reality. And so we do have to really take a look at that as a team and talk about it, because it is it's over the top in some areas. Now, some of that may be training, and not all of it is. So,
Thank
I'll
you.
leave it at that.
Thank you. I just
Yep.
was curious about that.
We
And then,
constantly.
We get some figures today that were sort of
right,
eye-opening.
right, interesting.
Yeah.
Especially because, we're receiving so much via email from the schools, report cards are on Aspen. It seems like we could cut down on, anyhow, I'll leave that to you. But another question, the NHS vestibule, can you just give us an update on that
Sure.
while you're here? Do you
We
mind?
Just put it out to bid.
Thank you.
The architect is supposed to hand over the final plans and specifications on December 11th, so I can post it to the town's website. There are 2 filed sub-bids in that bid. It's a DCAM certified because it will come in over $150,000. Any subcategory that is over $25,000 in a DCAM project has to come in as a filed sub-bid, meaning those bids come in first. So glass and glazing, because we have bulletproof glass, is definitely gonna be over $25,000, and the electrical work will come in over $25,000. So how that works is on December 28th, I have those bids due, those 2 bids. we take them in, we record how much the bids are, and we hand them to any GC that has pulled the bid. Then the GC has a different bid date. So their bid date is January 4th. So they either take the low bidder or not. They don't have to take the low bidder in those filed subbids, but it will affect their bottom line, obviously. So most of the time, a bidder, a GC, will take the low bidder unless they've had some bad experience in the past and they don't wanna work with this person anymore. So that process is well underway, and my final bids will be due January 4th. Included in that bid, we included the 2 sets of double doors that face the auditorium, the replacement of those. They're in pretty rough shape, so we decided to include that work in this bid. So we've talked to Dr. Bucky and Dr. Cohen about scheduling that, and we're hopeful, I know there's a lead time on materials, but we're hopeful that they can start on the auditorium sets the week before February vacation, and then work on the front doors, the vestibule itself, the week of February vacation, and then they'll have some ancillary work after to finish, but hopefully it'll be in that 3-week period. I know that there's some discussion about how they're gonna route people coming in. It might all go through the CPS at that time. I'm not sure what they've decided to do, but they're working on that to keep the building secure and safe during that construction.
Great. So it should happen this school year. All right. Thank you.
Steve?
Speaking of the vestibule, is that in here somewhere, or is it a capital item?
It's a capital item.
It's a capital
It
item.
was approved last year
Yep, okay,
in
thank
our
you.
capital appropriations.
I have no reference point whatsoever for $100,000 electrician, so I'll assume that that's an appropriate figure. Do you anticipate, can you anticipate any savings in
Hiring?
outside contracting that's been being used?
We've proven that over and over in our, I mean, I can go in and pull from Munis how much we spent
Yep.
on each electrician last year and add it up, and I could give you those figures. I don't have them in front of me, but, I've done it several times.
So that we could see next year a reduction in that particular
that
line
line
item
item.
if we can get this person in to do the job, yep.
Yeah.
Just curiosity.
And it's also
thanks.
AV, so when we advertise it, it's not just electrician, it's audio video, and it helps Jen.
Yeah.
It's all sorts of tasks that we can ask this person to do that we don't have anyone on staff to do right now. So we're hiring everything out. It's just expensive.
Yeah. Thanks.
Henry?
Welcome.
What about the windmill?
What about the windmill? You want me to give you
How's it
an
doing?
updated report?
How's it doing?
It's doing great, except the price for RECs is way down right now. So renewable energy credits, I think I've all told you are, we take readings at the end of every month. I send them off to a contractor that sells the amount of RECs that we have. So for instance, last month, I think we had 18 RECs. So they go out and they sell them. Renewable energy credits are sold to the generator of the power. So it's very, very technical and complicated, but in general terms, they normally pay for them what they would pay as a fine for not buying a renewable energy credit. So right now, the prices are very low. So we're not getting big checks like we were for a while. We're getting pretty minimal checks, but we're still, I think, and don't quote me because I just updated the spreadsheet about 2 weeks ago. I think since its inception in October 2011, we've saved $244,000 having the windmill. And that is not just the renewable energy credits, it's also hooked up behind the meter. So I have a calculation that I take the amount of RECs, the amount of energy it produces, and I have to go in and figure out how much we're paying per kilowatt hour that month, and that's how much you've saved that month on having that windmill hooked up. And I can certainly give you the spreadsheet anytime you want. I update it all the time.
It's a ballpark 25 to 30,000 a year.
Between the two?
Between the two.
Yeah.
If you add the two up.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you, Diane.
Tracy, first time through.
I did.
We told her you would all be nice.
Of course.
Oh, God.
I know. Try, Steve.
I will.
So up on the screen is just kind of an overview of the actual charts that we'll see in a moment. And it really just outlines that this year the community school is requesting an increase in town appropriation of $50,000. And that we are made up of 9 revolvers, including community recreation, that we are still having conversations with the town for us to continue management of the fields and the tennis courts. We're looking to come to an agreement on how much longer we would continue to do that and what that will look like for our teen enrichment coordinator, who also facilitates that work in collaboration with the DPW. Martin, if we look at the next slide, this outlines all of our departments and the percentages that each department make up. So looking at the expenses within each, I realize rec is actually not included in this breakdown. Should we skip, do you want to skip to the revenue?
Yeah.
Looking at revenue, our revenue is currently strong. The coordinators are working really hard to choose programs to run and make sure that they're advertising them well and filling the seats, and listening to what the community has to say about the need in order to get the income. We could not function without this town appropriation, as it's a large percentage of what's coming in for us, and we also really depend on grants and donations that come in, as we're obviously not able to fundraise. It's important for us to share the good word of what we're doing and collaborate with the community to get that support. We're working on our customer service. It's been an area within the team that we're really focusing on. Try to have great outreach within the community and listen to what the need is, and try to work hard to find what needs to be done to support the community members. Looking at the same slide, yes, the same slide. Admin makes up a large percentage, as you can see by this slide. That being that the other departments bring in revenue, and our administrative department does not. So that's where a lot of that appropriation goes. You'll see also the pool. It's a big expense to staff and maintain the pool, so that's why that's also a big chunk. Our early childhood programs are funded by a grant, also in combination with the appropriation. The CFCE grant this year is around $75,905. So we are in our 3rd year of that grant, and we'll look to apply for those funds again moving forward. And this is just a breakdown, looking at the appropriation compared to the fees that customers pay to take part, and also the percentage that is a gift or donation that make up our budget.
I think for, particularly for the first time going through this, to look at that 20-year historical comparison is really helpful, because you can see how little the appropriation is compared to the overall budget. And one thing that community school has always strived to do is not to have the fees be so high that it excludes participation. And I think that's always the challenge for community school. And they have been very aggressive during Pauline's tenure, and Caitlin, and now Tracy, in seeking grants and donations. But that's really a very small percentage of the overall in what it takes to meet their budget. But I think the good news is that the appropriation has increased pretty consistently since 2010. I think that was the low point, and we were coming out of the recession, and I remember that was a time where we had to make a cut across the board, and including community school. So we've been able to go up considerably, but understand that while that may look like a huge increase from 16 to 17, the 350 to 465, 65,000 of that was for rental of off-site facility, and another amount there was because of the the community school assumed the costs of health insurance. And that was a huge shift from town. Excuse me.
A technical question? Appropriation means directly from the town?
Yes.
Okay.
Excuse me. Got it. Thank you.
Okay, questions? No?
Couple of questions. What percentage is the community school of the whole budget?
Well, it's not set up that way, because their appropriation comes separately from the town.
So you don't even
We
add
don't,
it in?
we don't add it in.
I'm
Haven't.
noticing that each area, community school, adult literacy, some of them are operating at this moment in a deficit, some in a surplus. Ultimately, I saw a surplus, I think, at the end, in the do not print section. Do you anticipate between now, and I'm assuming it's the fiscal year end of 2018-19, do you anticipate some of those areas that are operating in a deficit to improve?
I think that would be the ultimate goal, that as Martin kind of coaches me through this process, because we've been working very closely, the goal is that each revolver balance itself out. With, obviously, like you've seen, within many of the departments, it's just not possible and that's why more appropriation would be allocated to one revolver as opposed to another.
The reality is that programming for students often is it might be a loss leader on the financial side, but it is the cost of doing
Business.
business.
So, for example, our early childhood programming,
Right.
a lot of those programs run for free. They're getting families in the door, and then they become connected with the community school and the school district, and then that leads to more involvement in programs that would run for fee. But it's important that we get families in.
Pauline?
Yeah, congratulations on a clear budget, and this is a lot to manage. I know that it is. What's your biggest challenge?
Financial challenge or a challenge within? To be really honest, we get asked quite often within the community school about funds for enrichment. So how to support a student who might not be able to enroll in a program because they can't afford it. And we currently apply for funds through Nantucket Golf, and we have a $30,000 tuition assistance scholarship that our outreach coordinator manages and has meetings with families that apply for that tuition assistance. But that assistance, that money never comes into play within the community school. It's directly given back to families to support their children that are enrolled in childcare across the island. So it's a challenge for us to not have funds to be able to give scholarship and assistance to students who might need it to be able to, do intramural basketball or to enroll in an enrichment program after school. We do our best to try to keep the cost low, but we struggle to find funds to be able to fully support a student to enroll in something enrichment-wise. We are fortunate to have the Will Brown Scholarship. So if a family is specifically looking to enroll their child in swim lessons, it has to be Learn to Swim. That's what those funds are allocated for. That's a great piece where our outreach coordinator can meet with this family, determine what their needs are, and then continue to support them after they've been awarded that Learn to Swim scholarship. But it's just for Learn to Swim. It's not for any of our other programs. So that is one struggle that we live in, and I really think staffing can be a challenge when we run a lot of our programs with hourly staff at times of day where it's kind of hard to fill that gap. Looking at extended day, it's a challenge to find staff that want to work between 2:20 and 5. It's also hard because a lot of the teachers' assistants that are in the school would be prime candidates to work in those positions, and we're held to 5 hours a week because of their contracts. So, they might want extra money, and they might already have those relationships with those students, but they can typically only work 1 or 2 afternoons a week, making our program not as consistent in terms of staffing as we would hope for.
I wonder, I was on board when we got the very first golf scholarship, and I also was part of the MFN grant that had the childcare tuition. I think it might be time to have a conversation with them, because I think it hurts the community school that if you put in another request for something that's as valuable, you're kind of locked into the preschool tuition, and as you've just said, it doesn't come back to the school. It goes out to the other preschool community, which is wonderful. And
I will clarify, our camp, families can apply for that assistance if they're enrolled in AcVenture for the entire summer, because that counts as childcare. So that is an instance where those funds do come back to the school, to the community school.
but you're talking about a certain amount of money that really, in the big scheme of things, is not a lot of money, right? Because that 30,000 can get eaten up pretty quickly.
Very quickly.
So I just think it might be an opportunity now to sort of have that conversation, because your needs have grown.
Yes.
And your programs have grown. And the other thing I just wanted to comment to Zona's identifying the changes in some of the programs. It's not uncommon for the history of community school to have strong programs that are gonna be revenue-based and bring in additional funds to the cost of the program, and that sort of offsets the cost of programs that you're not going to necessarily be able to charge the full cost of what the program is. Learn to Swim might be, Adult Swim might be one. So it's always been sort of where you have stronger programs that can sort of, at the end of the day, because it's one budget, can sort of take up. And the ones that tend not to make the money are the ones that really, the folks participating couldn't afford what it really would cost
Right.
to run the program. Not a great business model, but it is, you've got the luxury in a way of having 7 other budgets that you work with. Just a few. But I just wanted to help clarify that. Thank you, Tracy, this is great.
No
Jen?
questions, thank you.
Steve?
I love what you do,
Thanks.
and I think you're doing a great job.
Thank you.
Just out of curiosity, the $50,000 increase, in a sense, is from the town. That's
Yes.
for appropriation?
That's the request, yes.
So who decides that? The town?
Well, the request goes to the town, and I think you justify it as Tracy has justified it. The town is in a position where they really want the community school to run the recreation piece. So she has a little leverage, perhaps.
I was just curious. My
yeah.
favorite chart is the one of all the different things you do. I think that's terrific.
Right. I would like to share that one area that we've grown in, or actually two areas where we've grown this year. When I started in this position, I hired a new driver's ed coordinator. That position was housed by Blair Janelle among 3 other jobs that he was doing, and driver's ed is thriving. The student population is growing, and so we hired Dan Weber, who is still working on his training, but he will test hopefully at the end of December. And so he will be able to manage the books of driver's ed, the online components. He also will be able to do the classroom portion of driver's ed and the car portion, which allows us to start to meet the needs of the community and offer driver's ed over school vacations at times where sometimes athletes would struggle to sign up, or families might see the benefit of students might want to do it in one small, compact amount of time. So it really opened the door for us to offer a different model within that program. And then this year we also piloted our extended day, our pre-K extended day. So that grew our staff. It was interesting to see how we could support the Pathways program, and hopefully as the district considers universal pre-K, if we could continue to support the district in that way. So,
Great.
Henry?
thank you.
No, I think it's
Thank you.
amazing all of the things that you're involved in, and juggling them, I think is
She's done a great job.
fascinating, like a one-armed paper hanger. Okay.
Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy.
Committee discussion and votes to be taken. A vote to approve the donation to NHS gift account for nursing and allied health program from Dorothy Harrison Egan Foundation, in the amount of $15,000.
Move to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
A vote to approve the NHS Diversity Club's field trip to Boston's Cultural Center and Cambridge Cultural Survival Bazaar, December 15th and 16th.
Till moved. Second.
All in favor?
Second.
Aye.
Yeah.
Meeting minutes of November 13th.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Transfers and invoices.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Yeah.
Aye.
Superintendent's report.
I'll keep it short. During budget season, you have the enrollment that shows a decrease from 1676 overall in the district to 1672. It's not unusual in January and December and January to see some fluctuation, but we have job security.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? I mean, it's 4, 4, and 4. I just find that so bizarre. But can you give, general reasons for the withdrawal? All right, so NHS had 4.
Housing has been one of the biggest ones. People have
Really?
lost housing.
Wow. CPS.
I think in this cycle it was seasonal employment that they moved off that.
And I actually gave them the night off since I didn't anticipate that, but I can speak to it, and Logan might be able to speak to it. I think the other piece that you have at this time of year is some students going off on extended vacations, and they're withdrawn at some point, and so I know that NES, that was the case in some of those. Well, they either, they may go back, they may not be, children actually who are immigrants, but their families may be going back to El Salvador, and so they sometimes will go 4 weeks, 6 weeks is not unusual, and it's not always an immigrant issue. It may be simply people who choose to wrap extended vacations
Go away for a month,
around
and then you automatically withdraw them.
after a certain number of days.
We talked about that.
Right,
in
we
one of
did.
the other meetings, right,
Yep.
what that number of weeks is or something.
Subcommittee work group, any reports?
Policy committee
Hmm?
It's a policy committee minutes.
Okay. Student
Nothing to
council?
report, though. We
We
met.
Okay.
Student council?
Very informative.
Everything's going well. Right now, the student government is planning December Delight, which is this Saturday. Of course, every year we've got 2 sports games on the same day, which is tough because varsity teams are mostly made up of seniors. I know that the swim and dive team will be gone, and also I believe hockey or basketball or some other team has a meet.
Basketball's home.
Basketball's home.
Home.
Girls are home, I believe, yeah.
And then, right now the student council is trying to work on planning another dance, hopefully in February, Valentine's Day sort of thing. And then, we're trying to get some more sports competitions going, similar to our badminton competitions later in the year, hopefully when it gets a little bit warmer.
Be great.
It's always a lot of fun to get out some of our competitive tendencies.
Not you, Mike.
Yeah, you're right.
Not anymore.
Right. You're out.
I think
Kickball.
I think that's it for right now. Veritas Press Week is right now. Yeah.
Actually, Henry is just back from a trip that he might want to mention, though.
Yeah. Owen, Hudson, and I were joined by Emmett Clark, the sports editor, and we went to visit Natalie Gammons, your old friend. She's in Dublin for her first semester at Northeastern International. They have a program where you go away your first semester, so she's doing her nursing prerequisites in Dublin. So we went to visit her, and that was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Nice. Can I ask Henry a question? Do you have a rough idea how many students attended the last dance?
I don't. It was a good turnout.
It was a great job.
I'm not sure. I think we made a little over $1,000. Not net. That was just gross, and then we had to pay for police detail, which is a couple $100. Decorations and stuff, which were a single purchase that we'll hopefully use for future dances. I think we made $700 or $800 overall, and then for Powder Puff was a pretty good turnout. We made, I believe, around $500 for the Harvey Foundation. Seniors won again, just like
I'm
for
glad you got
homecoming.
that
Yeah.
Henry, I have a question. Why did you choose to have it under Arctic conditions?
We didn't foresee that. It was terribly cold. It was I think the coldest day up to that point in the year. There were plenty of people who came and sat for 10 minutes and left. It wasn't something.
But you could have had it the morning of the Vineyard game.
We had to work with administration and the athletic department. I don't remember.
They had that option,
Yeah.
but I think they liked playing under the lights.
I do think Under the Lights was sort
Okay.
of plan, and
That's it.
sort of backfired a little bit. But it was a lively affair nonetheless.
I thought it was a great game.
Thank you.
Mike, do you have anything on the agenda?
I don't.
Okay.
You know, we're in good shape. Next meeting is budget.
I had a couple of questions. Are we gonna have refreshments? It just looks like a lot.
It is a lot.
It's gonna be a long night.
It is.
What-
And it
Were
is
we-
every
were we-
year.
Were
It-
we gonna
What night
invite
is
the
that?
culinary class
next-
to
our
serve
next-
us?
Yes.
Yeah.
That was
They
mentioned
get ready for
last
the
year.
competition.
Okay.
They get ready for the competition.
Three,
Let's make one
four,
comment.
5, 6, 7 budgets.
Just as a final comment, I got to attend most of the focus groups that were held last week for the superintendent search. I just wanna thank everybody that participated in that and took the time, the community members, our faculty, our administration. I think that it was just very, informative, and it was a lot of great dialogue, so I was fortunate to be part of that.
Ditto.
And remind people, if they weren't able to attend, to take the survey online, because essentially the same questions asked in the survey is what was discussed at the focus groups.
Ditto. I think people were, I attended all 5, and I think people were willing to speak their minds about what they were looking for. Not gonna talk about any of the substance of it. Jim Hardy will be putting out a report, which I have, on our behalf, promised will go up on the website as soon as it's given to us. He said it becomes a public document when he pulls together the information from the focus groups and the survey, and then delivers that to us. We get that at the same time that all the applications are in, or soon thereafter. Should be before Christmas anyway.
And the survey's up until the 15th
Yeah.
of December.
And maybe we can ask Henry to encourage his classmates and students to take that survey. That would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of slots in there where you can ask your own questions and make your own comments. It's not all A, B, C, D, yes or no kind of survey.
We can also ask Laura Ramo to make an advisory announcement. Just
That'd be
request
great.
that students take the survey.
Can we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Yeah.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
So, while it's a public document, I would question the wisdom of putting it up where the candidates can look at